misconception of us running down and inviting them to Thanksgiving dinner and all of that. And that's not what happened at all.
People are taught and told that once the Pilgrims came here, that all of the Wampanoag people, essentially through a series of tragic events, died off. We did not all die off, and we're proof that that's not true.
That we're lost, or we're like fairy tale, some sort of fairy tale. And so that's one big issue that is facing our community, is not being recognized even in our own homelands, that we still exist. That's a major one.
I do think that you can't put Native people all in the same box, because we're not all the same. Each tribe is different. Each tribe has something special and unique about it, whether that's a food, whether that's their language, a dance that comes from there. You can see simply, we didn't use big Western drums that come in the circle that sit in the center. We used small water drums.
So first thing being is that folks don't believe we are still here. Folks don't know that we still exist, that we have homelands, and that we have our own community.
Led by women. We're a matrilineal society, meaning that, if a man from another community was to marry into this community, or to a woman from Aquinnah, somebody from Ashby married a woman from Aquinnah, they would be coming into our community. That's what matrilineal means, connects through the woman. And your children, everything is traced by the woman through your lineage. And so I think one of the biggest things, though, is that women were leaders, sonkash, or I also think you can say sonkash, sonsqua. There are other ways to pronounce it in the language, but female leaders were actually more prominent than male leaders. And that's extremely written out of history. And then also here in Aquinnah, we didn't learn about that as children. We didn't talk about, Awashunks, we didn't talk about Weedamoo, and other amazing women who, when the English got here, the English first went to men, and they were, talking to men as if they were, oh, can I use some of your land? Can I use some of this area? Can you teach me how to do these things? And the men were like, okay, yeah, sure. But you need to talk to the woman, like to our female leaders. And the English didn't understand that and didn't get that. And, when I think about the murder of Weedamoo, when I think about murdered and missing Indigenous women, I think it really begins with that piece of history. But women were badass, and they married for allegiances. For alliances and allegiance. Like, they were systematic, they were strategic, they were just absolutely incredibly cool. So we don't talk about that enough, and I think that's a big part of history that needs to be retold.
And we've been resilient in the face of discrimination and Christianization. Our tribe, and specifically the Wampanoags of Aquinnah, have never been dislocated completely from our land, and that's unique. There are not many peoples on this continent, on Turtle Island, who have not been removed from their land through various acts of the United States or their own choice. We've stayed connected to this land, and that's why this is such a powerful place for us. So that history needs to be told, and if it's not told, then we risk being displaced, and that's not good for the land here. The land is very much alive, and it needs its proper caretakers to be on it.
Well, there's a lot to the history, the actual truths of our history and what happened to our people. The historical stuff of, our cultures and our traditions.
I think the main thing is the history, the true history of what has happened to the Wampanoag Nation as a whole.
I believe that we're not taught the truth because there are a lot of histories that are painful to recognize, to acknowledge, and I think that to go back and to revisit those atrocities that occurred also mean you have to make reparations, and perhaps there are people that don't agree that reparations should be made or given to Native and Indigenous peoples. But that's something that I think, that is just my opinion, but I do think that that's probably one of the major reasons why it's hard to sit with what your ancestors may have been responsible for genocide. And it's hard to sit with, you know, that long ago, you know, there were people who were responsible for the loss of our language, the loss of our medicines, some of our practices, some of our ceremonies, a lot of our traditions. And to take responsibility for that means also, like I said, you know, just allowing space for conversation and discussion around how to move forward in a better way.
They don't want us to they don't want people to believe that we exist. They don't want people to know that we're here. I think people are also threatened by any people of color having any sort of semblance of power.
The insistence to other us is what keeps us back and prevents real truth from being told. We are a powerful people and hold a lot of wisdom, and I think that if people listen to us more, this planet and this country, even this island, would be in a much healthier and whole place.
They don't teach it because then they would have to talk about what they did to obtain the land. And they came here to colonize, to build colonies, you know, which was right here. I mean, not in Aquinnah, but, you know, close enough in Plymouth. And a colony, you know, it's not just coming over and settling and, you know, people moving from one place to another and building a new life. Because usually where you're going to build a colony, there are already people there. And you probably don't want people moving in and settling on top of them, you know. So the colonizers have to dominate. They have to take the land. They have enslaved people.
Happened because we have been erased from history. You know, I think on average there's like 3 to 4 pages dedicated to Native American people in a history book. And even then, we're talking about 570 something that are federally recognized, and then you have tribes that are state recognized.
I think our tribe's history of resilience is incredibly important, and especially when you're combating the myth that we're no longer here, it's important to recognize that we are still here, and it's only through our resilience. We've been resilient in the face of disease. We've been resilient in the face of land partitions and shady land dealing.
This land is specifically so important for our people because it's home, and that's the gist of it, right? Is because this is who we are. You know, we are connected to this land. We're tied to this land. We are the land. And when I was coming up as a little girl, hearing my grandmother, hearing my mother, you know, talk about their experiences, you know, there was a sense of pride and a sense of belonging to a place. And so that's what Aquinnah and Martha's Vineyard, Noepe, that is what, you know, we hold on to, because we know that this is what our ancestors and our families, you know, hold on to. And so it's important to us because it gives us a space to belong, you know, and it gives us a space to exist and to continue to look forward to the future for the next 7 generations and beyond.
There's so much. The Wampanoag territory, or I would say Wampanoag, I guess, land was so much larger than just Aquinnah or Gay Head and Mashpee. It was huge. And we generally were in good relations. Obviously, we had frictions with other communities, but we were pretty large, and we were trading, and we were moving and going other places. So I think that's a big part of that history.
Because when they landed, it was like December, when they landed in Plymouth, they landed in Wampanoag territory. And people also don't consider that we had territory for the Wampanoag Nation, and there was Narragansett territory, Nipmuc, and Pennacook and Abenaki, or, nations have boundaries. We weren't just free floating over the countryside, we were had boundaries with protocols when you go into someone else's territory and all this sort of thing, because we had a structured, organized society.
Over here, they don't want to follow our ways. Capitalism is the root, and I think when we're talking about land and the protection of water and land, that goes against everything that our government and our world does. It doesn't care about the land. You can see why we're having these issues and conversations on climate change or climate adaptation, right? We're having them because people have completely misused and overused resources around the world.
And the land, similarly, it's so important because all of our ancestors before us have walked it. Their blood, their bones, all of their DNA is literally on this place. And when you go to certain parts of the island, especially the parts that are undeveloped and the parts where they're open and there are lots of other living relatives, birds and four-legged creatures and everything, you can feel that your ancestors are there. You can feel their presence, and it feels really good just to know that this place has always been so well cared for, and that you're a product of all of that care and that love. And that's why we take such care of our land, so that the future generations can also appreciate it and sustain themselves from it.
Our ancestors are important because they're with us. So if you forget that, you lose that connection, then who are you? Who are you? Who are we? I think it's important to pay attention to the fog when it rolls in, because our traditional stories talk about, fog and Mashuk being in relation to us through the fog, right? And smoking his pipe, I think, is how the story goes. But some say that Mashuk created people from the fog. Some people say it's from the clay of the cliffs.
But we want land back so we can have our ceremonies back, and so we can have our gatherings back, and so we can teach our ancestral wisdom to our community, and so we can share more songs together. And when we share songs, we nurture the earth, and we facilitate, the growth and the return of plants and animal species year after year through our words and through our prayers.
I think that it's important for us to be kind and to be human, to be responsible and respectful of one another. There are different cultures that exist. There are different peoples from all walks of life that still carry their culture, their, the pride of who they are. And it's important that if we are going to coexist, that we have that mutual respect and understanding of one another, but also a respect and an understanding, especially living on this island. Understand where you're at, understand what this place means to people like us, and understand, and not only understand, but also get to know us, and you might learn something. You might find something that, changes your way of looking at things, and for the better, and vice versa. We can help each other. We can grow together. And I think there's a lot of issues that, we face on a daily, and I think it's hard to push for those issues when people aren't trying to understand, when people don't want to understand. But we're still here, Asnatayanian. Our language is still alive. Our songs, our traditions, our ceremonies, we are going to continue to hold on to them and teach them. And we just hope and pray that, there's that sense of respect. And if nothing else, just respect in the least. So.
I wish people knew just how important it is for us to be in community with one another and to gather together and that we can't do that if we can no longer afford to live on our own land.
People are no longer in existence, and so we don't have futures, or we're not presently here. And it's okay for us to evolve. It's okay for us to try and exist in the world that's around us. That's natural for us to do, right? And so I think like there has been an erasure presently happening that's going on, right? People don't want to believe that we exist. We come in all different shapes, size, forms, hairstyles, skin color. We're a product of the world. We were adventurers. We use the waterways to go around the world and create relations with different peoples across the world. So I think that's super important to tell.
The truth hurts. People don't want to. They don't want to hear it. That's pretty much the simplest answer to that. People just don't want to know what really happened. It's just a painful thing.
And I think that for the 400 years since contact, your dad is absolutely right. Nobody wants the real truth. And I'm not sure whether it's as painful to non-Native people, but knowing as a Native person that they don't know the truth is very painful.
Everybody thinks that we're not here, we were never here, or we're just this thing that existed once upon a time.
We're still here as NaDaizja and Neon.
We're still here.